Oh, America, the perfect melting pot of cultures, where people from every corner of the globe can live together in perfect harmony. In all seriousness, us Americans often do take all the freedoms and opportunities that we have in this country for granted. In the current day, there are around 40 million people of varying ranges of African ancestry living in the United States, and it's been 154 years and 5 months since all slaves were officially declared free on American territory. Slavery has left a huge impact on Black American culture, genetics, history, and identity, but the disparities between modern white and Black Americans are nothing compared to what they could have been if many modern and historic Black leaders had their way and Black Americans created their own independent country separate from the United States. Just a quick disclaimer, I am obviously not in favor of this taking place. I do not support segregation or racial discrimination on any level whatsoever, and also I'm going to be joined later on in this video by my friend Bobby from Angst Vision, whose mom is Black American and whose father is actually Liberian, which, if you didn't know, Liberian was sort of a pseudo-American colony established by free American blacks in 1822, believe it or not, so he'll certainly have an interesting perspective on the subject. The way I see it, there are two ways this scenario could play out in the real world. Either A, Black Americans fight and gain an independent state in Southern America shortly after emancipation from the American Civil War, or B, Black American activists gain an independent state through lobbying during or directly after the Civil Rights era of the 1960s. As much as many groups might hope for, a modern-day independent Black ethno-state in America would simply be infeasible in our generation. The United States is simply too diverse, and race relations have significantly improved since the aforementioned time periods. Now, the reason I think an independent Black ethno-state would be most likely directly after the Civil War was because the percentage and concentration of blacks in the southern US was at its peak during this time, and there were millions of newly freed blacks who had freedoms and liberties the likes of which their ancestors had never dreamed of, and were almost entirely unemployed. Although heavily outgunned, in many areas of the former Confederacy, Black Americans made up a majority of the population. So, judging by sheer manpower, it might have been possible for them to simply outnumber and overwhelm their southern white counterparts, and if the federal government decided to not fight for its territory for whatever reason, they could create their own governments in areas where blacks made up a majority. Directly after the Civil War, many southern states were majority black, and many had large swaths of majority black territory. Many areas that are now mostly white used to be majority black 150 years ago, such as East Texas and North Florida. So by taking all of the areas of the greatest African concentration in the US in 1865, the new map would look something like this, spanning an area from as far as parts of Maryland to southeast Texas, with virtually all southern states falling under its jurisdiction. And even though southern Florida was never majority black, we're going to assume that it was somehow annexed into the new state because it would be a little awkward just hanging there. Now, whether or not the Gullah people and Louisiana Creole people would be a part of this new state is up for debate, since the Louisiana Creoles may or may not identify with other Black Americans, and the Gullah people are actually descended from Afro-Bahamian slaves and have more of a Caribbean culture, so it's unknown whether or not they would be joining our new nation. But if they did, perhaps they would be granted a territory akin to an autonomous region. Now, whether or not white and other non-black civilians living in this territory would be expelled or remain in the country is up to your imagination. If they are expelled, relations between the new black state and the United States would be undoubtedly extremely hostile from the get-go, with the two nations probably taking part in some sort of ethnic population exchange, similar to Turkey and Greece in the early 1900s, with all blacks leaving US territory and all whites, and possibly all Native American, being expelled from the southern country. The new nation would be extremely impoverished, unorganized, and disunified, so it would take a small literate elite in the country to run government and unite the people. Even so, it's extremely unlikely that they would be able to retain their sovereignty for more than a few years, but let's just pretend that it happens. In this timeline, because the cultural differences between white and black America would be so much larger within a handful of generations to the present day, the dialects of English spoken by the two groups would probably be mutually unintelligible, effectively creating a new language of sorts. This new hypothetical black American culture could be very similar to the Amero-Liberian culture in real life, and relations between white and black America would probably be infinitely more strained than in our world, but they probably wouldn't be on the same level of hostilities as North and South Korea, with migration between the two countries probably being existed, albeit extremely limited.
The Civil War was one of the most, if not the most, tumultuous times in our country's history. When the South surrendered in 1865 and the slaves were to be set free across the Union, there had to be a consensus of what the free blacks would do and where they would go. Around this time, the population estimates of blacks in the U.S. were between 4.4 to 4 million. Faced with much hardship and discrimination, they had decided to found a sovereign nation with the blessing of the U.S. federal government. They called this new nation the Republic of West Liberia, after the already founded Liberia in 1821, a nation that believed on free trade and freedom. The red on the flag stood for the bloodshed, the green for the fertile soil and long growing season of their new homeland, and black, of course, represented the people. The deal struck would be a landmass similar in area to the area of all the Native American reservations in the United States. According to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, an area of this size would be roughly the size of New Jersey, which clocks in at 8,723 square miles. But the majority of the free blacks lived in the Southland, and that was their home. Together with Ulysses S. Grant, they came up with a suitable location. They decided to annex off the eastern part of South Carolina and give this abundant area to the freed blacks. The combined areas of the South Carolina counties amount to about 8,509 square miles, a perfect compromise. The capital would be where Charleston was formerly located, and the new name of the city would be called Freedom Town. And who better to lead the South than Carolina's own Beaufort-born freedman, naval commandeer, and tactician Robert Smalls, who was responsible for persuading Lincoln to allow black soldiers in the U.S. Army and Navy. Smalls' military and political service gave him a springboard into governance, being not only a soldier, but a Republican congressman of the U.S. House of Representatives to South Carolina. Smalls would ensure that the military and law enforcement cross-trained, and that a sizable number of able-bodied men and women were to serve military terms as Coast Guard and Border Patrol, and if they chose, would have careers in law enforcement. He would also have them trained in guerrilla warfare and hunting and trapping tactics of the Native Americans. Aside from growing their own food, West Liberia's economy would be a plantation economy as well, where farmhands would produce indigo, which was imported from the Old World and produced alongside rice en masse for trading. Rice had the added benefit of being trade-worthy and a staple food as well. The jobs that would arise in West Liberia would be the common jobs of the era, ranchers, farmhands, planters, weavers, tanners, tailors, and many more. In West Liberia, blackness is determined patrilineally. Mulattoes are considered non-black if they have a white mother and will not be admitted. Per Gates' estimates, there's a population of about 4,880,700 blacks, of which 10% were free. The free slaves that were mixed race were 40.8% of the time, and the enslaved blacks were mixed about 10.4% of the time. Based on that and the 80% likelihood that freed slaves were of white fathers because they would be favored, and black mothers, which were born into slavery, the estimated number of mixed-race blacks with white fathers is 524,733. They will not be admitted into West Liberia. Therefore, the starting population, subtracting them out, would be 4,355,927. Part of West Liberia's initial social structure is the inverse of the antebellum segregational South social norms. Due to the fact that DNA technology had not been developed at that time, people had to rely on their eyes and phenotypic observations and or documentation of lineage. In order to be initially accepted in West Liberia as a citizen, the individual in question must pass the reverse brown paper bag test. That is, they must be darker than a brown paper bag. This is a nod to blackness, and also the tribalistic nature of such a requiem would serve the purpose of the ability to trust that the citizens have the nation's best interests in mind, and as it is created by and for black people. I may be reiterating, but another way that West Liberia turns things on its head is that blackness in citizenship and ownership are patrilineal as opposed to matrilineal, which was the criteria of the southern plantation owners. In West Liberia, mulattoes and biracials are not considered black unless their father is black. As long as the father is black and has passed the phenotypic test, the offspring is granted blackness. Incentive to keep a nation black by having a black father, since it is less likely that a black man in those times would have had a non-black wife. All the mulatto offspring of a planter and a slave mistress are not considered black in West Liberia. They are especially distrusting of mulattoes for this reason, as they usually worked in the house. So now it's their turn to be outside. It is highly probable that West Liberia would establish a trade route with the Bahamas, as the unification of people of Gullah descent up and down along the low country coastline share a common culture with those in the Bahamas. In addition, because South Carolina's naval might, a possible encroachment and conflict with the British may occur over the island of Bermuda, or it could be a peaceful international trade point. Use your imagination.
Be sure to check out Bobby's channel called Angst Vision, where he'll be releasing the uncut version of his section of the video. Be sure to let us know your thoughts on this completely hypothetical situation, and be sure to shut down any racist discussions you may see popping up. And thanks for watching, everyone. This has been Mason, and I'll see you next time.